a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm really excited to welcome our next guest onto our interview series, Monique Jefferson. She is the Chief Human Resources Officer at New York Public Radio. Monique, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you, Christina, so much for having me here today. Very excited about this conversation that we're going to have. So my pronouns are she and her. I'm a cisgender straight female. So hopefully I got that correct. So
Yeah.
In terms of what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was in elementary school, like if you had asked me this question when I was younger, when I was in elementary school, I either wanted to be an Air Force pilot or a dance choreographer. I was that kid that would make up, like I would hear a song and make up routines in my head, and I'd be dancing like J-Lo or
Yes.
some of the choreographers back in the day. But once I got to high school, in all seriousness, I had an opportunity to take an accounting course, and that changed my life.
Wow.
It exposed me to something that I was actually good at. And then because of that, I wind up going to undergrad for majoring in accounting, and then decided to pursue a career path becoming a CPA. What was clear to me was that all I knew was that when I grew up, I wanted to have a career and be in a job where I could be independent. I, make enough money where I could take care of myself. And the key was that I didn't want to have to move back home with my parents after I graduated. So that was my goal, to have a good job coming out of school and making sure that I was making enough money so that I didn't have to move back home and I could be independent and, sustain and take care of myself.
Absolutely. And you have a great job today. And I have so many questions about your journey to this work as well. And just, what you're currently working on a day-to-day basis. But I want to first ask, what would you say defines you, Monique, as a person?
Yeah, I've given this question a lot of thought, and really, I think it starts with how I was raised, my experiences, and how I grew up. The values that I have today were instilled in me by both of my parents. They taught me to, be an advocate for myself, not be afraid to have an opinion, to speak up when you see things like injustice or inequities. Speak up. It's like the slogan on the subway in New York City: see something, say something, right? And so my parents instilled that for me, that, I was very vocal as a kid. So it's like, sometimes when you see something that's wrong, don't be afraid to have a voice and speak up for those that may not have found their voice yet, or may not be comfortable enough to speak up. So I was very clear from a very young age of, who I am and where I came from. I'm a Black girl, born in Brooklyn, New York. So, and my experiences throughout the years is that early on, I was always in environments and circles where I was one of only one, meaning, so in elementary school, I was the only girl of color or Black girl in my class. And then it's similar to, I'm not sure how many of your listeners have seen that movie. It's called The Hate U Give. And so the beginning of the movie, she has her foot in two worlds. She goes to like a private school, and the way she shows up and the way she operates and the way she moves through the school is very different than when she leaves that community and goes back to her home, right, in her neighborhood, and how everything changes. That was me. That was my life growing up, having my foot in two different worlds and having to be able to learn how to navigate that, but then also survive and thrive through that. So, yeah, I went to Catholic school, but I wasn't Catholic. So that was the whole layer of, difference. Like I knew at a very young age that, I was different, because I was a Black child this is back in the 80s in Long Island, which was predominantly white, went to a white school, white neighborhood. So difference came up and showed up in a lot of different ways. Right. And I was aware of that I was different because of the color of my skin at a very young age. And so those experiences really shaped, who I am today.
Well, thank you for sharing that kind of background and also your lived experience as well. I definitely agree with you that they shape who we are and how we show up today as well. I have a lot of questions around kind of the work that you do and how that manifests in kind of your day to day. I know you've been at New York Public Radio for just about a year, I believe, and the organization continues to move through transformational change, and you are a leader there. What are some key pillars of this change?
Absolutely. So our the transformation that the organization is going through is really rooted, and the foundation of that is within our 3-year strategic plan. And there are 3 key priorities, or 3 key pillars, if you will, to that plan. First and foremost, we want to make sure that New York Public Radio continues to serve communities by expanding our reach to younger, more diverse listeners and readers.
Mhm.
As you know, well, you may not know, within the public media space, the demographic has traditionally been older white men.
Mhm.
And so what we really want to do is expand our audiences, our listeners, our readers to more younger, more diverse populations. 2, we want to continue building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture. And that, of the 3 pillars, that's my world. That's the space that I spend most of my time, and where I continue to focus on our talent and
Mhm.
people strategy and people agenda, myself and the team. So it's really continuing to build a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture. And then lastly, it's financial stability and growth. Even though we're a non-for-profit, it doesn't mean that, we have to be in the red or in the hole, right? And so how do we continue to grow our business and really develop, whether that's through content and programming, and looking for those different programming and content opportunities.
I love that. I think those are really important goals. And also, it sounds like from a holistic perspective, from content and programming to also internal for the folks who are working in your public radio and who are contributing to the culture every day, really making sure the environment is equitable and people feel like they can belong and do their best work is so important. So, coming into this role, 1/3 of your team is unionized. Can you share a little bit around the learning curve of working with unions, especially for folks who have never worked with unions before?
Absolutely. So I can share my somewhat limited experience, having been with the organization for 11 months now. And I've had a couple of those holy moly moments for those of you that are Seinfeld fans. So first and foremost, if you are going to be renegotiating or initially doing the bargaining for your CBA,
Mhm.
one thing to be mindful of is that you need to be consistent in what you are agreeing to and inclusive in that. And so what I mean by that is, when you are at the bargaining table, you're there discussing and negotiating with regards to your union members, your union employees, unionized employees, right? However, if you, for example, if as part of negotiations, you agree to increase the benefits and say, okay, we're going to give you 4 weeks of vacation now instead of 3 weeks of vacation, you need to make sure that that change that you agreed to, that you then go back and you apply that across the organization. You don't want to create a situation where you're having the haves and the have-nots, or 2 sets of employees, that these employees get these benefits or programs, and then this other set that's not unionized gets something different. So that's one learning that I've realized and can appreciate very quickly. I would also say there's a difference. Again, this is my first time having the opportunity to support a unionized population. And so my prior experience primarily focused on employee relations, not labor relations. And there is a difference. And I would say the main difference that I picked up there is this whole concept of feedback. So a lot of organizations, they want to make sure that everybody's included and that they hear feedback and get feedback from their employees, right? But when you're dealing with a unionized population, you just have to be careful if you're going to put together any kind of working groups or any kind of employee committees. You have to be careful that if you're going to put a union employee to as part of that committee or that group, you have to be careful, because you do not want that to be interpreted or perceived as a labor management committee, which is very clear that that's for purposes of dealing with union issues around wages or benefits, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so when you're dealing with different issues in your organization and you want to create a committee of some sort that's representative of employees, because you want to make sure that you're getting their feedback, you just have to be mindful who serves on that and how you set it up, because you don't want to get a charge against you that says, oh no, this is too much or similar to a LMC, a labor management committee, and you're not allowed to do that, right? So just another thing to just be mindful of. I'm not saying that you don't want to get their feedback, right? And you don't want to include them, but you just need to balance that and be mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you definitely want to be consistent and you want to be kind of clear in the communication there as well, and really intentional, doing their research. And these are really good holy moly moments for folks listening, in my opinion. Another piece of, company culture is that relationship with your manager. You might not be talking to a CHRO every day. You might not be talking to the CEO every day at an organization, but you are engaging with your manager pretty frequently. And there's so many articles today around, if you don't leave companies, you leave bad managers, or you stay,
Right.
you have an incredible manager. From your perspective, what training or support are you offering, either like net new coming from individual contributor roles or existing managers?
Yeah. So going back to the goals that I talked about previously, one of them was around having an equitable, fair, and inclusive culture.
Mhm.
And at New York Public Radio, for us, what we realize is that really starts with our managers, our frontline, supervisors and managers, and making sure that they are positioned well and prepared to really develop and grow healthy teams. We want a vibrant, healthy organization, employees. That really starts with the managers who are frontline, right? And so what we've done is we've kind of doubled down, if you will, on that investment. And so we launched earlier this year foundational, like what I call management one-on-one training. We partnered with an external vendor and to deliver, it's called Managing for Impact. And it's 4 modules. It's a total of 12 hours of management training. And we talk about things around communication style. We put the managers through a DISC assessment. We also provide them with a coaching framework, like, how do you really properly develop your teams and deliver feedback, and trying to give them a coaching framework to do that. So, and really, how do you give them that feedback and coach and support so that they can continue to grow and develop in their career.
Providing resources are so important as well, especially for new folks who are just coming into the role for the first time and they want to motivate their team and really have those conversations for feedback too. I want to ask, in terms of measuring the effectiveness of managers and leaders, sometimes it can be hard. How do you think about measuring your effectiveness as a leader or success as a leader for other folks on your team and at the organization overall? Do you have any KPIs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The 2 KPIs that immediately come to mind, and again, I'll go back to, we have a clear talent agenda, and our strategy, our priorities. So it's important that you want to make sure that everything is aligned. So, and I also believe in that what gets measured gets done, right? And so 2 KPIs that come to mind, first and foremost, is that we have committed to securing a diverse slate of qualified candidates for all of our new and or replacement roles. And in doing that, we want to make sure that our employee population is reflective of the diversity demographics of the New York metro area, which is the community that New York Public Radio serves. Our second KPI from an HR standpoint is we also have committed to a goal of trying to increase our overall employee engagement scores. The last time we did our full employee engagement survey was back in December of 2020. Yes, that was during the pandemic. And so now we're scheduled to do our full engagement survey in the next couple of months. And so what we really want to do is show, either meet, if not exceed, what our score was from when we took it previously. We anticipate that is going to be challenging because we recognize that our employees have been, everybody, everywhere, right? It's been a tough, rough 2 years.
Yes.
And, to talk about the Great Resignation, and there are employees are leaving the workforce or moving to other organizations in droves, right? And so there's a lot behind that. People do it for various reasons, but part of those reasons speak to engagement. They're not engaged at the organization that they're in, whether that's for money, for compensation purposes, or whether that's the culture and the environment, or if you're an employee of color and you just feel that you're in a toxic environment, you're not being seen, you don't think you can be your authentic self and bring your full self to work, and therefore you're looking for another environment where you're better supported from a culture. So all that speaks to culture, right? And culture, it's the engagement and the culture go hand in hand. So that will be and that is a key KPI for us with regards to measuring the engagement levels of our employees.
I think engagement is also another critical piece of data that you can tell, everybody has feedback too when you're trying new things, when you have initiatives and everybody's working towards a common goal, and you can get that feedback directly, or you can give that feedback, peer to peer as well. Can you share an example of how employee feedback has really impacted a change in either a policy, a strategy, or initiative at New York Public Radio?
Yes, absolutely. I have a very timely one. We're still in the midst of the pandemic.
Yes, we
so,
are.
so when I think back to last year, during the summer, shortly after the vaccine was made available to not only adults, but then also teens and younger children, one of the things that we heard loud and clear through surveys and through speaking with our employees is that they were not comfortable coming back to our offices unless we put a vaccination mandate in place. Mm-hmm. And so our leadership team, it's a tough spot for leaders to be in, because you're trying to balance the needs of the organization and the desire to get back to that sense of community and connectivity, because we're humans. And as much as we don't think we need it, this Zoom thing is only gonna, it can only get us so far. You look lovely. It's great to see people's faces, their families, their pictures in the background, although I have a virtual picture of right now, but their dogs, their pets, their kids. At the end of the day, you need that face-to-face human interaction, right? And so as leaders, trying to balance that sense of community, and then also get back to the culture, the aspects of the culture that were thriving and that was good prior to the pandemic, balancing that with people's fears, concern, and ensuring health and safety of our employees, which is what one of our guiding principles and our number one priority was, right? And so we really listened to them. We let them drive and kind of, lead the leadership team into how are we going to re-enter and come back to our offices. And so it came back loud and clear that if you want us to eat, we're not even going to consider or think about coming back until, you have this, you put a vaccination mandate in place. And so require the vaccine to come back to work. And so that's exactly what we did. And so I would say, at that point in time, the majority, like 98, 99% of our workforce was vaccinated. And we had very little to no exceptions. Like we had a couple of exceptions, like, as you know, either for medical reasons or religious reasons, but we had very, very little exceptions to that. And we only had one case where the person chose to exit the organization because, they just were not, for whatever their personal reasons were, they chose not to get vaccinated. And because we had the mandate and we were unable to find them a position that they could continue to do remotely, because we did try to work with the employee and support and accommodate that. But unfortunately, just given the nature of our business, we were unable to find a role that they could do remotely. So then they made the decision to leave the organization. But I think I think that's fantastic that we only had one incident of that.
Yeah, I mean, physical safety is really important as well, in addition to psychological safety at the workplace. And I think that is a really prime example of listening to employees and what they're saying in terms of what they need to be successful in their role, in their job day to day. I know one of the other goals you mentioned was around diversifying content in the audience of New York Public Radio. And we talked about this too before, but what kind of unique role do you see New York Public Radio playing in really setting the bar for the public media industry and creating a really equitable workplace?
Absolutely. So New York Public Radio, we're headquartered and based in Lower Manhattan, and we serve the New York metro area. So New York, Jersey, part of Connecticut, we serve that area. And so for us, I will speak to New York Public Radio's 19-point race equity action and plan, which we published on our website last year. And so through that, by publishing and putting that out there, we're being transparent, and we're also holding ourselves accountable when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, as I mentioned previously, one part of our strategic plan and part of our priorities and goals was to, increase the diversity of our audiences, our listeners, and our readers, right? And so given the nature of our business, that directly impacts, the communities that we serve and the services that we deliver, not only holding ourselves accountable to make sure that we are doing it